Okay, so the last time we met, folks, we were talking about Irish immigrants. And when the Irish came to America, where did they mostly... Yes. But we're talking about the Irish as well. And so, where did they mostly live, folks? New York, Boston. And why did they live there and not in the West? They couldn't afford the land, right? Were most of these Irish poor?
Yes.
And so, what decade did they mostly arrive in? The 1830s, 1840s, or 1850s? 1840s. So if that's not clear in your notes, folks, make sure you write down 1840s and 1850s. Okay? The vast majority of the Irish came in the 1840s and 1850s. So make sure you jot that down on your notes. Now, German immigrants also coming into America. And where did they mostly move to?
The West.
And why did they move to the West? Because they were wealthy, they could afford the land. What other evidence do we have that proved to us that they were wealthier than the Irish? They immigrated as families because they could afford it. So be aware of that as well. Now, were all these immigrants welcomed by these true-born Americans, you could call them? No. And so what group emerges that was upset with all of this immigration? The Nativists. Oops. So you see the rise of this Nativist group. And what were they all about? What did they hate more than anything? Immigration. Now, they hated the Irish specifically. Why? Because of job competition. So remember that, folks. They mostly hated the Irish because of job competition. So what kind of signs would you see in these eastern cities? No Irish need apply, or NINA. But they hated both Germans and Irish together in total. Why? Because they were what?
Immigrants.
Not just immigrants. They were outbreeding them. And what was their concern about Irish and Germans? They were Catholics. So the important part, folks, is that they were Catholics. So make sure you note that. Is that the fear was their Catholicism. They didn't like their religion. They worshipped the Pope, and that was weird. So these true-born Americans, they called themselves, hated these immigrants, and they ended up forming what political party? The Know-Nothing Party, because every time they were asked about vandalism against immigrants, what would they say?
I know nothing.
I know nothing. Everyone good with immigration and the Know-Nothing Party and Nativists? Okay, let's talk about technology then. The first thing we're going to talk about today are transportation improvements. And when we're talking about transportation improvements, I want you, again, to keep in the back of your mind how these improvements will benefit who? Specifically who? What is the name of this unit, folks? Democracy. So who are we asking this will benefit? The common man. So again, when we're talking about improvements and technology and whatever else, in the back of your mind, you should always ask yourself, so how is this benefiting the common man? How is this benefiting, you and I? So the first technological improvement, folks, is going to be the road building era. The road building era. Now, what were roads like before we began building these new roads? These roads were made out of dirt. They were made out of, they weren't even made. They were just roads. Maybe there was grass everywhere. There were giant rocks. And what seasons might these old roads be problematic? Winter seasons and the rainy seasons, because they might get muddy. And if these roads, let's say, had a lot of rocks, would that be bad for horses and wagons and whatever else?
Yes.
Definitely. And so they decided that these roads are not ideal, and we have to build new roads, more reliable roads. In fact, folks, they said that back then, it cost more to travel 9 miles by land than to ship something across the Atlantic Ocean from Europe. Because it took so long, and it was so dangerous, and it was so problematic to ship something by land 9 miles, it was just cheaper to ship something across to Europe. That's how bad it was. But then we built roads. And these roads were different because they were built with stone and concrete. And why might these stone and concrete roads be ideal? They're stronger. When it rains, what's going to happen to the water? It's going to flow off to the sides. Is it going to be muddy anymore? Not at all. So these roads, are they more reliable? Will they make travel faster? Will they make trade faster? Most definitely. And so a few of the roads that were created at this time, the first was the Lancaster Turnpike. Now, a turnpike road, folks, was when you would have a wooden bar all the way across with spikes all the way across that would block the road. And if you wanted to get onto the road, they'd have to take this turnpike and move it or turn it. And so how would you be able to use this road? What would you have to do? You'd have to pay a toll. So these turnpikes, folks, were originally toll roads. They were toll roads. And this is good because, again, would it be worth it for many to pay to use these roads? It's still faster. It's still probably more profitable. It's probably safer, too, because would these toll roads be guarded? You're less likely to get robbed, attacked by Native Americans, whatever else. But still, these toll roads are not ideal for who? Common man, because would they be able to afford these tolls? No. So what changed was that eventually we used federal money to build the National Road, featured here, also known as the Cumberland Road. So we use federal money to build the National Road or the Cumberland Road. Now it's important to note that we're using federal money here. And is this road going to have a toll? No, because it's free, because it's built by who? The federal government. The government built it, so it's going to be free. It's supposed to be ideal for the common man. And is this going to benefit the common man? Can they travel faster for free now? Can they trade for free now? Can they communicate faster for free? Most definitely. So this will benefit the common man. But here's the thing, folks. Two groups opposed the creation of these kinds of roads. The first group that opposed the road building era were states' writers. And why might people that supported states' rights be opposed to the federal government building this national road? Well, let's go back a little bit, folks. Who paid for this road? The federal government, which means who paid for this road? All the states paid for this road. So what might be the complaint from the states? They don't all benefit. So New York might say, whoa, 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 why am my tax dollars paying for a road from Pennsylvania to Illinois? How do I benefit from that? I shouldn't be paying for that. And instead, if these states want to build a road, who should pay for it? These states. And they said the federal government should not have the power to be able to force states to build roads. Whose power should that belong to? The individual states. So it became a states' rights issue because they said, I'm not benefiting from this. Let them build their own road if they want to. Does that make sense to everyone? It's kind of a constitutional issue. But the other group that was complaining about the creation of these roads were the northeastern states. The northeastern states also complained about the creation of these roads. And the reason why they complained, folks, is because almost all these roads moved from the northeast to the west. Okay, most of these roads went from the northeast to the west and back. They were east and west roads. So why might the northeastern states be concerned about all these roads that are now going east and west? What are they worried about now that all these roads are now built? People might leave. people might expand west. And if people are expanding westward, because is it easier to expand west now? Yeah. Why might the northeastern states be concerned? They'll lose their labor, so that's the economic reason. So they're afraid to lose their labor. And what's the political reason? They'll lose their population, and therefore they'll lose what? Power and votes. They'll lose representation in Congress. Does that make sense to everyone, folks? So again, with the road building era, is this ideal for the common man? Definitely. Transportation is faster, communication faster, westward expansion much easier. Good for the common man. But states' rights hate it because they don't like having to pay for someone else's road, and the northeastern states hate it because they're losing their labor and they're losing their political power. Everyone cool so far with road building era? Okay. The next type of transportation development was then, or rather, here's all the different roads that were being built at the time. National Road, Wilderness Road, Seneca Road, Albany Road, all that stuff. The Canal Building Era is next. Now, first off, what is a canal?
It's a giant river kind of structure.
It holds water, but rivers hold water.
It's a giant man-made.
Man-made. It's a man-made waterway, or a man-made river, really. So we began to build canals. And the reason why we began to build canals are for a few reasons. Number one, these man-made rivers were ideal because there's a problem with rivers. And the problem with rivers is that rivers typically go in only what directions? North and south. Most rivers only travel north and south. And in most times, if you're going to travel on a river, only which direction can you go? But which direction can you go only? South, because you're going downriver. And so they complain that, hey, you know what, this is taking way too long. Rivers only go north and south, but they don't go east and west. So they decided to make these canals that would go east and west. And the most famous example of canal was which one? The Erie Canal. The Erie Canal is the best example, or the most famous example of canals at this time, the Erie Canal. And the Erie Canal was based primarily, and really only, in New York. Which means, how did they likely pay for it? It was only in New York, so likely who paid for it? New York. It was paid with New York state funds, or New York state money. So who can't complain?
The states.
States' writers can't complain. Oh, you built it? Never mind. Go ahead, New York. And by the way, even if this is only benefiting, or it's only in New York, might other states still technically benefit from this? Because couldn't I, from Pennsylvania, ship my goods to New York and then use the Erie Canal?
Yeah.
Definitely. So even though states' writers are like, oh, we're not going to benefit from this, everyone benefits. Like the 10 freeway. That's only, well, it goes really across the country. It goes all the way to Florida. But the 10 freeway, let's say, was built only in California. Wouldn't other states still benefit from the 10 freeway? I mean, goods that come from China have to get on trucks and use the 10 freeway. And those goods go across the country. So it's kind of small-minded to think, I don't benefit from that road. But they do. Anyway, the argument was that canals were faster than roads. The argument was that canals were faster and easier than roads. Because the problem with roads is that you still have to load all the stuff on the wagon, and at some point, is it going to be really hard to pull that wagon? It's going to get too heavy. But with canals, you have a boat. And is it really easy to glide things on water? It really is, folks. I mean, you get shocked when you can pull like an entire boat by yourself on water, right? Because of the magic of surface tension. Right? That's usually how that works. And so the idea is that you would put your barge on the water, and you would get two horses on each side, and all you would need to do is get two very light horses to slowly pull your barge all the way across. And that's pretty easy, right? And is that going to be faster than traveling by road? You don't have to slowly push and then get it started. You don't need like a running start. Here, it's already floating on water. You just got to drag it with you. And it's going to be pretty easy. In fact, folks, this was so efficient that when comparing the cost of traveling from Buffalo to New York City, cost went from $100 a ton going by road to only $5 per ton going by canal. So the cost went from $100 to $5 when we went from roads to canals. Is that a massive change? Huge! Huge! In terms of time, traveling by road used to take 20 days. By canal, it would only take 6 days. Is that a major change? Folks, imagine waiting for your package for 3 weeks, and then imagine waiting for 1 week. Is that a really big difference in terms of time? And this is especially important when you're shipping what? Food. And because who is mostly going to be using these canals anyway, or roads? Farmers. And so are farmers going to benefit from these canals? Are they going to make more money off of these canals? Because the faster your goods ship, are you going to make more money? What do they always say about time, folks?
Time is money.
Time is money. Because if my food rots over 20 days, am I going to lose money there? But if most of my products will stay fresh in those 6 days, then I'm going to make a lot of money. And can I respond to your demands for more or less food a lot faster? Instead of having to wait for you to pre-order every 3 weeks, you give me 1 week, I'll make sure I deliver you this many pounds of hay and this many cows and this many things. It'll be much faster. And so, folks, did this make moving west easier? Because if you move out west, does that mean you're just going to be alone and poor and not be able to survive? Do you have more of a fighting chance now if you move out west? Because can you ship your goods across to the East Coast? Yes, you can. So again, did the common man benefit
Yes.
from the canal?
Yes.
Most definitely, especially common farmers. On that same idea of water, another invention created at this time, steamboat, created by Robert Fulton. And the steamboat was ideal because it allowed us to travel in which direction? Upriver. It allowed us to travel upriver, which means who gets to now be better connected with the rest of the country? The South. Because before, would the South have stuff brought to them? It's easy going downriver, but would they be as easily able to trade their stuff going north? They'd have to go by road or they'd have to go by ocean, right? But with the steamboat, you could travel upriver, and specifically, which river are we talking? The Mississippi River. M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-S. Something like that. The Mississippi River. The Mississippi. Mississippi. Anyway, the Mississippi River allowed them to travel upriver, which is ideal because, again, it connected which region closer to the other two? The South is now better connected to the Northeast and the West. Does that make sense to everyone? And to give you the statistics here, the numbers are really staggering. Before, to travel the 500 miles up the Mississippi River, it would take 500 hours. Because, I mean, you're going by hand, right? You're paddling up the Mississippi River, and that's really hard. But with the steamboat, you could travel that same amount of time. You could travel that same distance in how long, you think? 32 hours. Faster? I would definitely say so. You're talking about days versus day, right? Like, that's almost what, 500 days? It's like almost like 20 days almost versus 1.5 days. That's a huge difference. And so travel definitely became more efficient with steamboat. And did it, again, connect us more together? Did it make transportation easier? Are we more connected as a society? Definitely. So technology is amazing. Here again are different examples of canals. And here are the different river systems that connected us across throughout the U.S. So you'll have steamboats all the way across. The last area is the railroad building era. From 1828 to the 1870s. Now, the argument that the railroad builders made was that, hey, you know what? I mean, roads are great, but compared to railroads, roads are still what? They're still too slow. And again, do you have a certain limitation to how much you can carry on a wagon? Yeah, wood will break at some point. And what's the problem with canals? What might happen to canals? They might freeze up in the winter. In the summers, they might dry up. And what happens if you're carrying this really heavy load? What's the worst possible scenario? It sinks or falls into the water. Now, if you're on, let's say, a wagon, and your bale of hay falls off your wagon, is that the worst thing in the world? No, because you can put it right back on. But if your bale of hay falls into the water, are you pretty much done with that bale of hay? Because if you put it right back on, it might start to mold, it might start to get problematic. So there were still problems with the canal, even though it was more efficient. Some people said then, well, road is still better, but instead of regular roads, what about railroads? And you start seeing the emergence of railroads, or its nickname, the Iron Horse. Because, folks, here they are racing a horse. Now, horses were still faster at this time because these iron horses were still somewhat slow. They're not like the trains of today. But why was an iron horse better than a regular horse? It doesn't get tired. And if the conductor gets tired, what do? They just switch. I'm tired. Oh, okay. There you go, your turn. Do we have to stop the train in order to keep it going? No, so it was more ideal. It was faster. The best example, or the first example of a railroad, was the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, featured here. It was 13 miles long, but you might actually know the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad as the B&O Railroad from Monopoly. Yeah. Baltimore and Ohio Railroad is the B&O Railroad from Monopoly. You may not know this, but Monopoly is based on actual things. B&O Railroad, Reading Railroad, Park Place, Boardwalk, those are all actual places. Free parking, that's real. It's like everywhere. Go to jail. I mean, if you accidentally go the wrong way, I mean, make your GPS correct. If you land on go to jail, you're going to go straight to jail, and you have to like roll to get out. It's weird, so don't do that. And then community chest, just random chests you can just find money in. So real stuff. Anyway, railroads were ideal, but we don't actually really get into railroads until after 1860. But by 1860, folks, there was 60,000 miles of road. But they were mostly in what two regions? They mostly connected the northeast to the west. And there were very few rails in the south. And that's going to be really important when? During the Civil War. One of the major reasons that we'll win the war is because we have railroads and they don't. So again, we have railroads in the north and the west. They don't have very many in the south, so just be aware. The northeast and the west had most of the rails. The south had very little. These new railroads were somewhat problematic, folks, because one of the first problems that we had with railroads when we were first starting out is, one, there were no standardized gauges. Now, a gauge, folks...
The thing that checks steam pressure.
No, it's actually... Well, that's also a gauge, like a dial on a car. But a gauge here is track width. The problem is, The federal government wasn't building all these railroads on their own yet. They were being built by private companies. And so would private companies just build their own type of rail? So here's the problem. Suppose you want to get from point A to point Z. Well, you're going to have to go ahead and travel all these roads. You're going to take Jacob rails, and then Lewis rails, and then Lewis rails, and then Lewis rails, and then you're going to take Rosa rails, and then Amalia rails, and then you're going to take Enrique rails. And what's the problem trying to get from point A to point Z? Are you going to be able to do that on one train? What are you going to have to keep doing? Switching trains. Load, unload, load, unload, load, unload, load, unload, load, unload, load, unload, load, unload. Is that going to be somewhat problematic? Is that going to slow the entire process down? It's because all these companies were building their own rails, and they said, my rail is the best, you should use my rail gauge. And oh, mine's the rail gauge that everyone should use. And would any one of them want to switch to someone else's? Because if they did, what would they have to do? They'd have to build their entire railroad track all over again. And so they refused, and in the early years, you had this very inefficient train system. Yeah, you could get from Baltimore to Ohio pretty sweetly, but then what if you want to get from Baltimore to Ohio to, like, Illinois? Are you going to have to switch trains? Yeah, problematic. Second problem, poor brakes. Very poor brakes. So suppose this is your train, and this is a station you got to get to. Okay? So, you're coming up to the station, and you go, chugga, 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 chugga. Oh, there's the station. All right, put on the brakes. Oh, we missed a little bit. All right, we stopped. All right, let's try it again. Ready? Chugga, 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 chugga. Almost. All right, try it again. Chugga, 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 chugga. Almost. This would take time. Because we don't have pneumatic brakes yet, like air brakes. We literally did it by friction, where you would take your steel wheel and you would push a bar against it and you would try to slow that wheel down. And that takes a really long time. Okay, you would stand in front of a car one day when it's going and then dig your feet in the ground like in cartoons and try to stop it. And then tell me what it's like when you're dead, because that's not going to work. That's not going to work out well for you. But is this an efficient way to stop a train? No, and so it took a really long time. And that sometimes, folks, you had to be pretty exact because there were gangways to unload the cargo. There were ways to, like, refill the train with water and steam. You don't fill it with steam, but like water and coal. And so you had to be somewhat exact in stopping at the station. So that's a problem. This resulted in another problem, which was an erratic schedule. Because let's say they told you, oh, your package will probably be there by Thursday. But now you're running into a non-standardized gauge system. And your train can't stop, in the right amount of time. Are you going to get your package on Thursday?
No.
You probably will get it next Tuesday. Does that make sense, folks? It slows it down because if that's happening at every single station, at every single junction, that's really going to slow the process down. So you had an erratic schedule. The last problem, folks, was constant fires. What were the train's wheels made out of? Wood. What are train wheels made out of? Metal. And what are the tracks made out of? Metal. So what happens when you rub metal and metal together? Sparks. And so what ended up happening is that as they traveled across the Midwest, metal on metal, these sparks would fly, and they start these massive savanna wildfires across the Midwest. And it'd be like, do you smell that? And they turn around, there was these fires behind them, and it'd be like, you darn Native Americans always setting these fires. But it was them. They were doing it. And because they didn't realize they had to grease the wheels at first, massive fires across the West. We got better at it, obviously, but still, dumb problems. And so, still, better than roads? Definitely, though, right? Still better than roads, better than canals, and we'll get better at it. By the late 1870s, folks, we'll have like railroads that go across the country. But in the 1860s, we're going to take a break. Why? Civil War. The Civil War will distract us for a little while. And we're going to put a hold on railroads. But once the country regains itself, we're going to start building a lot of railroads. But it starts here in the road building era. Questions so far about transportation improvements? Okay. So would you argue, folks, that with roads, canals, and railroads, that it's faster to communicate? Would it be faster to travel? Would it be faster to trade? Would wait times be a lot less? Definitely. So because of all these transportation improvements, what you see the emergence of in America is regional specialization. Now what you have here is a map of what the country pretty much was back then in terms of region. You have the Northeast, which we've been talking about already. You have the South, and you have the Midwest. So do you guys understand the regions that I've been talking about now? When we say West, I don't mean California yet, because this is still the country that we know so far. Makes sense to everyone. Now, when I say that you see the rise of regional specialization, what am I talking about? What do I mean by that? What is each region now going to be able to do? They're going to be able to specialize. Here's why. Before they were connected, folks, was each region kind of on their own? If you lived in the Midwest, you'd have to make your own food. You'd probably have to grow your own cotton to make clothes. And you'd probably have to manufacture your own goods in order to make your own stuff. And in the South, when they were all alone and by themselves without very many good roads, they'd have to make their own food and grow their own cotton and manufacture their own goods. And then in the North, they had to manufacture their own goods, and they had to grow their own food, and they had to grow their own cotton. But with regional specialization, or rather, by creating railroads, canals, steamboats, and steamboats, is the country now better connected? And if I'm from the Midwest, do I have to still make my own goods anymore? Do I have to make my own factories and my own shirts? No, because who can I get those things from now? The Northeast. And will I get them in a timely manner? Sure, so I don't have to make my own goods anymore. And do I still have to grow my own cotton? No, because where can I get those from now? And can I get those in a timely manner? Sure, because of the steamboat. So the Midwest, can I, in this region, specialize in just one thing now? Yep. What can I specialize in? Food. And so because of transportation improvements, you see the rise of regional specialization, and the Midwest begins to grow foodstuffs, like wheat, grain, and livestock.
That's the Midwest, right?
That's the Midwest. All they now have to grow is foodstuffs. Wheat, grain, corn, livestock. Because if they need cotton, can they just trade for it now? Is it going to take months to get cotton? No, they can get it in how long? Like 2 days. Steamboats, right? And what about the South, folks? Do they have to grow their own food anymore? Because they can rely on who?
Midwest.
The Midwest. And do they have to rely and make their own manufacturing anymore? No, they can rely on the Northeast. So they can grow just what? Cotton. They can just focus and specialize in cotton. And what about the Northeast? Do they have to grow their own food anymore? No. Do they have to grow their own cotton anymore? No. They can focus on manufacturing and factories. Has each region specialized? And they can only do that because of what? Railroads, canals, steamboats. Does that make sense, folks? This was all made possible because they were better connected. We were now allowed to specialize. If I was living by myself, folks, would I have to clean the house on my own, do the laundry on my own, fix the computer on my own, do all that stuff by myself, right? But if I'm getting married, which I am, now my wife can be the computer whiz. And then I can do the cooking. If we have kids, they can be the ones who do the laundry and whatever else. And so now can we specialize and focus on specific things? It doesn't have to be just me anymore. And by the way, I just wanted to point something out there. You know when I said I had a wife? See how I didn't say she'd be the one who cooks? See how I said she'd be the one who did computers? Because I'm trying to break those stereotypes, guys. Why does the woman have to be the one that cooks? Bam! Breaking stereotypes. Small examples, folks. I'm the one who cooks. Bam. Small lessons every day. Anyway, does everyone understand regional specialization? Made possible by transportation. Because now the country is specialized. By the way, will we get better at each of these individual things now because we're focusing also? I'm going to get really good at making food, and they're going to get really good at cotton, and they're going to get really good at factories. What you now see the rise of in America is an integrated national market. Now the integrated national market, the country's market is going to be what? What does integrated mean? Connected. When we say integrated, we mean that the national market is connected. Because before, folks, we didn't have a national market. All the markets were based on what? Like their own regions, right? Local markets. But with an integrated national market, are we trading with ourselves now? Throughout the country. Which means our market or our economy is now self-sufficient. We have a self-sufficient economy. And isn't this exactly what we wanted? Isn't this exactly what the American system was designed for? To be able to create internal improvements? Again, folks, write down the American system. All done because of the American system. Because who paid for those roads? The American system. The bank, the tariff. But again, now we have a self-sufficient economy. Who don't we really have to rely on anymore? England, Europe, France. We now have a self-sufficient economy. Is that going to make us a stronger nation? Most definitely. So when we're talking about this rise of the American economy, this market revolution, do you guys see what I'm talking about? We went from these small local economies to a massive market economy that's all connected. And who benefits from all of this? The common man. The common man definitely, and everyone benefits, but the common man specifically, because can the common man move everywhere and have a chance at being successful now? He can move out west and become a successful farmer. He can move to the south and be a cotton farmer. He can move to the northeast and be a factory worker. And in any of those professions, do they have an opportunity to change class, be more successful? Yes, they do, because the economy is growing. More jobs, more opportunities, better connection. On a scale of 1 to 5, folks, show me your understanding of transportation improvements and an integrated national market. Awesome. Let's talk about communication improvements then. But isn't that fascinating, though, folks? It's not like it just happened. Like, the piece-by-piece method of getting to the integrated national market happened that way. So, what's the old-fashioned way to communicate, folks? You want to, tell someone something happened. How do you do it? You write a letter. But will that take a long time? Writing a letter from, Florida to California will take forever. So we got to make it faster. So one instance of making communication faster, Pony Express. The Pony Express, established in 1860, allowed a message to travel across the country 2,000 miles in only 10 days. That's pretty good, folks. 2,000 miles in 10 days. 10 days. That's pretty quick. It means you're traveling 200 miles by horse a day. Now, doesn't mean that one guy traveled 2,000 miles in 10 days. The way it would work is that they'd have stations, and one guy would get on a horse and travel as fast as he could, then he'd pass the message on, and he'd travel as fast as he could, and he'd pass the message on. It was like a 2,000-mile relay. Does that make sense? But that's really what it was. It was a 2,000-mile relay. And in the 18 months of operation, they only missed one deadline. In 18 months of doing this, they only missed their deadline once, which is pretty good. Now, my favorite part about the Pony Express is their wanted ad. Because look who they're looking for. They want young, skinny, wiry fellows. Why do they want young, skinny fellows? Lighter, faster. They want them not over 18. Why? Because they're also younger, lighter. They must be expert writers and willing to risk death daily. So you must be willing to take on that challenge, because what might happen to you, folks? Native Americans might attack you. You might fall off your horse. You might crack your head open. I mean, accidents happen. But the best part is this. Orphans preferred. Why do they prefer orphans? Yeah, because no one's going to miss you and got nothing to live for. All you live for is money. But it's true, right? All you have left to live for is the money. So if you have a family, are you going to ride recklessly? No, because you're worried about your family being sad or whatever. But if you are an orphan, the argument was you don't care about anything but money. So risk your life, and if you make it, you're going to be rewarded $25 a week. That's pretty good money, folks. $25 a week is really good money. Even today, that's good money. $25 a week. You find $25 a week somewhere. It's like on the ground. That's good money. Anyway, good, and is this faster than sending a regular mail? Definitely. But the problem is if your message was secret or important, is 10 days still a really long time? Like, the British are coming, and it takes 10 days. Is 10 days going to be a really long time? So, not fast enough. So how do we make it faster? Telegraph. And you have the introduction of Morse code developed by Samuel Morse. It's actually not very hard at all once you memorize it. But Morse code was one of those things where you could train someone to kind of communicate immediately. And the best part about Morse code was that communication was what? Instant. It was instant communication. Instant communication. So you didn't have to wait a day, you didn't have to wait an hour, you didn't have to wait a minute. You say, hey, war started. The British are here, and can you start mobilizing right away? So it was instant communication created by Samuel Morse. Very important. And does it make the Pony Express kind of obsolete? Definitely. By the way, folks, do you know how much it cost back then to send just one word? Any guess how much one word cost back then? $10 per word. And does anyone know what the average hourly rate was? Your hourly wage? $0.10 an hour. So if you got paid 10 cents an hour, would you be sending messages to your girlfriend all the time by telegraph? No. So only what kind of messages would be sent by telegraph? The really, really important ones. Otherwise, how would you communicate? Still by letter. And maybe by Pony Express. Because super expensive back then. $10 per word. Why was it so expensive? Because it was so rare back then. I mean, again, just imagine starting the technology to build all those telegraph cables. Like, we see telegraph cables, or like telephone lines, are everywhere now. That's because we're all paying for it. But when some guy builds it the first time, he says, hey, how am I going to pay for this? You individually will pay for it each time you use it. That was the only way for them to make their investment back, by charging a lot back then. Yes? The way the telegraph works, folks, is that this is connected with a wire, and it goes all the way to another something called a sounding key. And when you would touch this, it would connect, it would close the circuit, and then it would start a magnet here, and it would keep tapping every time this tapped. Pretty much what would happen. This is a key. This is a sounder. Every time you would close the key, or the key, it would close a circuit, it would turn on this magnet, and then it would start drawing the metal down. And so the idea was that every time you click, it would happen all the way across the country. That's how telegraph works. I made this from Radio Shack and Home Depot. We'll take a look at it later when we have more time. Yes?
How did they space the letters out?
Tap, tap. Then you stop for a while. And then tap, 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 tap. Tap, 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 tap. Stop for a while. Also, you would read it over time. No, there's no backspace. Anyway, folks, that's Morse code, instant communication. Now, that's great in the country, but what you're still lacking is international communication. So what you eventually see the emergence of is the Transatlantic Cable. And what the Transatlantic Cable did was that it connected the U.S. to who? To Europe. To Europe. And why is this so significant? How long did it take to communicate between America and Europe back then? Weeks. Now with the Transatlantic Cable, which was a telegraph cable across the ocean, how long would that take? Instant. Hey, war started. Oh, okay, cool. Not like, war started 3 weeks ago. Instant communication. Really helpful. By the way, folks, the Transatlantic Cable, we laid it down in 1858. And then it broke 3 weeks later. But we permanently repaired it in 1866, and this is a cable that we still use today. It's buried pretty much along the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean pretty deep. It's not on the floor, I don't think, but it might be floating just a little bit. But it still connects us directly because it's a hard wire. Because today, folks, how do we mostly communicate with our other countries across the world? Satellites. But might the satellites be destroyed at some point or another? Sure. So this is still a direct link between Europe and the U.S. It's still pretty important. We still use it today. It is considered a terrorist target, so we constantly watch over it. But it's pretty hard to get to because it is like under the ocean. And the last time I checked, Osama bin Laden did not have a submarine. Also, he's dead. In the ocean, so maybe he does have a submarine. Anyway, Transatlantic Cable. Good there? Instant communication? Is all of this good for the common man, folks? You mean communicate important information faster, trade policies, whatever else. Lastly, let's talk about agricultural improvements today. We will probably end somewhere here today. Agricultural improvements. Folks, are farmers able to trade much easier now?
Yes.
And that's great, but the problem is, if they have nothing to trade, does it really make a difference to them?
No.
So what else do the farmers have to be able to do? Improve their stuff. We will go ahead and talk about agricultural improvements next time we meet. See you guys later.